Hello, and welcome to Raider HQ After Dark. I'm your host, Raider. And in this video, I wanted to revisit the supplemental claim process and specifically provide a few more tips in certain aspects of how you're filing your supplemental claim, because there's quite a few veterans that are actually not submitting the forms or providing the evidence that would maximize the likelihood of a favorable outcome. So I'm going to be going over the manual a little bit. I'm going to be going over the 20-0995 form. We're going to have another whiteboard. And then, I'm just going to kind of ramble a little bit. But what I'm hoping is you'll watch to the end of the video, because there will be tips sprinkled throughout in order to effectively, increase your likelihood of a favorable outcome. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Now, I will also say that my dogs have been naughty all night, and I have had to re-record this about 7 times. So we're just going with this one. So if you hear just all heck breaking loose, then I'm just going to keep it in. So okay, I'm going to start off with the manual references are going to be in the video description, so you feel free to look them up as you need. The reason why I have the definition of a supplemental claim up is where we're going to talk about the first tip. So, a supplemental claim is any complete claim for a Department of Veterans Affairs benefit on a prescribed application form where the claimant or his or her authorized representative disagrees with the decision the VA made on an initial or supplemental claim for the same or similar benefit. Now, the first thing I want to say is when they talk about a same or similar benefit, it's where, like, let's say you claimed your ankle directly to an in service injury, okay? And then you do a supplemental claim form in which you are claiming your ankle due to direct service connection, due to an in service injury. That's the same or similar benefit. You're not trying to swap theories out, okay? Now, why this matters is because the majority of the time when somebody fills out a supplemental claim, they never tell us what they disagree with. Like, they will just say left ankle, January 24th, 2024. Like, that's it. That's all we get. Okay. And for conditions that have never been granted, that is not hard for us to figure out. Now, what would be helpful is if you, the veteran, kind of spoke to us and said, "Hey, look, I'm applying. Previously I was denied for missing element 1. I had my element 2, so this time I'm submitting a current diagnosis from my doctor, so and so." Like, this is where the credible lay statement or the credible, the personal statement come into effect, where you're telling us what you disagree with. You are disagreeing with the fact that you do not have a diagnosis, and you are submitting evidence from a medical doctor supporting the fact that you do now have a current medical diagnosis. The reason why that's beneficial is because it helps me as the rater with a safety net for you. Okay? So if you tell me that you have this evidence and this evidence will prove the reason for denial, number one, I can see, did they understand the prior rating decision and why they were denied? Okay. Number two, it helps me to see, hey, did they submit evidence to prove the thing that they just said? If I go yes, then I expect to see an examination. And if I don't see an examination, that's your safety net kicking in. I'm going to defer it back and go, hey, look, the reason for denial was because they were missing element 1, a current diagnosis. They have submitted that. Please, VSR, get that exam. Now, the reason why this can happen is because VSRs don't adjudicate claims. So they do not have a good working understanding of how to read narratives at all. Like, they don't know how to read your rating decision and see kind of what the reason for denial was. So at times it can be the blind leading the blind whenever you submit evidence and you don't tell it. So the reason why you're explaining what you're disagreeing with is, and you're kind of writing it out the way that I said, is because you're also telling the lay VSR, hey, look, I was denied for missing no diagnosis. Here's my diagnosis. okay? It increases the likelihood you're going to get the exam you want to get, so that way you have the opportunity to potentially get service connected. Now, if you have a lazy VSR, and I'm going to just say lazy because if they're competent, then they would know they would be able to read, and figure it out. But if they're, overworked, busy, whatever it is, whatever excuse we want to attribute it to it, and they don't get you an exam, and then you get a lazy rater, no new and relevant evidence. That's where you'll see that at. So you need to be mindful that sometimes you have to do more so that way the VSR doesn't say it's not new and relevant evidence. Okay. Now I've kind of beaten that one into the ground. Now, the same or similar benefit, right? There is time, or I should say, there are times. There are times whenever you can claim something like my left knee directly due to an in service injury. And that can come back as not being service connected. Okay. Now, the disagreement is, right, up here when we talk about the disagreement, you have to communicate to us. So let's say you want to change to a different theory of service connection. Rather than your knee being due to the in service direct theory, you want to switch to the secondary theory and say that your right knee is secondary to your left knee. Perfectly valid, perfectly appropriate. Perfectly missed if you don't tell us that. If you don't articulate that, we cannot raise the secondary theory to issue unless there's medical evidence supporting it, right? If you should suggest a new theory for service connection, it makes it to where we pretend like we've received just a brand new claim. If you have element 1, element 2, and element 3, after suggesting a new theory, you'll get an exam. But if you don't suggest that new theory, then you will not get the exam and they will treat it like it's I'm still going for the direct theory. So you have to report that. And where should you report that? You should report that on your 0995 form, your supplemental claim form. Now, this is the supplemental claim form. Some tips and tricks on here. I'm going to tell you that it doesn't tell you to do this, but you should write the reason why, what you're disagreeing with on this form specifically. The rater has to review this form, and this comes back to your safety net. So, left knee pain. I always suggest you write a credible lay statement as a symptom, because if you are missing a diagnosis, this will help you to get potentially a new exam for a different theory. But anyway, left knee pain, I'll just say due to in service injury, right? Like that's your original one. What I would want to see on appeal, right, is something like left knee pain, no, maybe pain due to denied due to missing current diagnosis, new diagnosis from Dr. Evil, right? So I would, if this was the reason why you were, if this is how you originally claimed it, then I might, submit it like this. Now, as you see, it cuts it off, right? So because it cuts it off, what you can do is you can just put it down here, right? And then that will, new diagnosis from Dr. Evil. This tells the VSR I was denied due to missing a current diagnosis. New diagnosis from Dr. Evil, and then you can say what it is. Now, another tip for a supplemental claim is if you are going to report that you have a new diagnosis of patellofemoral pain syndrome, okay, spelling is optional. If you're going to tell me that you have a new diagnosis for this condition, okay, another tip is submit a copy of that particular document showing the diagnosis with your claim submission. If you do not, and the VSR has to go looking for it, the odds of your claim getting denied again for no new and relevant evidence skyrockets. Because if you were denied for there being no diagnosis, and I can't find a diagnosis when I do my exam screening as a VSR, then guess what? That VSR is going to just say no new and relevant evidence, send it RFD. So you need to submit this claim complete. I have the evidence in hand. I'm submitting it all at once. So that's just a tip. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about, and I will come back to this, is you have to tell us what evidence, where to get the evidence. If the new evidence is somewhere else, it's not part of the VA, you need to put that on here. If you don't, then there's no new and relevant evidence. Another thing is your VSO cannot sign this form. If they do sign this form, and you do not sign this form, right? Like if the POA is the only one, right? This power of attorney, if the VSO POA are the only ones to sign it, then you're going to delay your claim by a minimum of 30 days. Because the duty to assist up here, like the 5103 notice, must be sent to you, right? Like you must check this box. But if you don't sign the form, right, that you don't care about the 5103 notice, and the POA is the only one to sign it, then your claim will be delayed by 30 days. So you can sign it and the POA can sign it, and you don't delay 30 days. So this is another tip in order to kind of cut down on the, unnecessary delay of your claim. Now, also going back here, I'm gonna come back to this form, but I want to talk about the reasons why you file a supplemental claim. Okay. Now, the reason why that primarily the majority of supplemental claims happen is because the condition was not service connected. It was missing an element to grant. Okay. So what we're looking for in terms of evidence to remedy that and grant you is whatever element you were missing, you have to supply that. Okay. If you are missing a current diagnosis, then you need a medical doctor to supply you with a current diagnosis. If you were denied for no diagnosis and you try to submit a credible lay statement, doctor beats veteran 100% of the time. So the only way to fight this one is to provide a current diagnosis. Now, this element 2, for whatever theory that you're going for, if you're missing it, you need to supply it. So the easiest one to think about is the direct theory of service connection. If you didn't have in-service treatment, then you're going to have to pivot to those lay and buddy statements in order to try to supply that. And you need to tell the VSR that you have submitted lay and buddy statements for the sole purpose of satisfying the missing element 2 from the prior denial. If you don't do that, they're going to see a lot of forms, but they're not going to see a lot of medical evidence. So they're going to say, nope, no new and relevant evidence. I mean, it might be new, but it's not relevant for them. So you have to keep that in mind. I know it's a shortcoming of the VSRs, but they're being asked to review the prior rating decisions, and they honestly don't have much training in terms of reading rating decisions. So there's opportunities for them to mess up. That is a training issue that should be, if I had Doug Collins' ear, oh man, that man, he would get sick of me. Now, element 3. Okay, if you were denied for element 3, additional lay statements that were not like nexus statements, like personal nexus statements from you that are trying to make a link between A and B, if those were not previously of record, they could be good enough to get you another exam, at which point in time the examiner would use those and kind of contrast them. But I'm just going to tell you that, if 20 years have passed since then and you provide another lay statement, it would be the minimum effort that you could provide. You would want to get a medical opinion from a qualified clinician that weighs in on your evidence and says, oh, yeah, I think number one, the in service event for direct could have caused a chronic disability. And I think that that chronic disability is what we see today, that there is no break in chronicity. So, this is the first type of thing and the most common type of supplemental claim that we see in rating. Okay. Now, what can happen is there's three other types. There's service connected conditions in which you disagree with the examination you got. And a lot of you will, this will ring true. Hey, I was doing a range of motion thing and the guy eyeballed it and didn't use the gonometer, right? The thing that measures the degrees to which you can bend. So that's where you can do a supplemental claim and you can say, hey, uh, my exam wasn't sufficient. I would like a new one, and explain that to us. Explain the fact that the gonometer wasn't used. Because what happens is the rater will go back and do a full review of the evidence, right? And if an insufficiency is found, and yes, I will take your word for the fact that they didn't use the gonometer, then I will get you a new exam. And then we'll kind of, we'll take the old exam and we'll look at it after you get the new exam, and I'll kind of compare them and I'll take symptoms from both exams, and whatever the highest symptoms are is what I'm going to go with. Okay. Now, the problem with this is that if you don't tell me that you disagree with the examination, I'm going to more likely than not say that you disagreed with the percentage that we gave you. Okay. And what happens if you don't articulate what you mean, you won't get a new exam. I will just redo your evidentiary review. I will re-rate everything with the existing evidence of record. So you can technically disagree with an evaluation that you got and say, hey, look, I think the evidence of record, I should have gotten a 70. You gave me a 50. That's fine. This is a valid reason to disagree. And under normal circumstances, I will go back through and I will take all the evidence that was true at that time and I will reprocess it. I'll resubmit all the documents. If I get the same result, I'm going to confirm and continue the prior rating decision. If I get a different result, now, if it's good, I'll grant, right? Using the proper, I'll go back in time for the effective date. But I can also find that they gave you too much, and I can propose to reduce if it's under 5 years, if the 5-year rule doesn't apply. So be cautious with this. But coming back to this, if you don't tell me what you're disagreeing with, then I will assume the majority of the time that you're disagreeing with the evaluation, and I will not get you a new exam because it's not warranted. A new exam is not warranted if the evaluation is disagreed with. Okay. So if you are the individual that disagrees with the examination that you got, you need to tell us. If you don't tell us, we can't read minds, right? The crystal ball's on layaway. So, the fourth type, okay, of reason that you can disagree with is you disagree with the effective date, okay? And we get a lot of these. So unfortunately, if you disagree with the effective date and we've adjudicated the decision, then the only remedy that you have for this is you must file a clear and unmistakable error and or a higher level review, okay? You can potentially just file a higher level review if it's within 1 year of the rating decision and point to the fact that you don't think that the effective date was applied correctly, right? I wouldn't start out with that, but during your conversation, during your informal conference, I mean, I might start out with the fact that I don't think it was adjudicated correctly. And then once you get the informal conference and you've hooked them in, then I would talk about the effective date. Because a clear and unmistakable error has a certain set of criteria and requirements in order for you to effectively propose a clear and unmistakable error. And if you don't provide the laws and regulations that were not clearly applied, then what'll happen is we will say that you don't have a sufficient claim, and we will send you a letter and we will just close your claim because you have to go through the clear and unmistakable error process in order to technically disagree with it. But trick here is the tip. I'll say it's a tip, not a trick. The tip is that you can, if a higher level review is done within a year of the decision, the DRO has the authority to redo the effective date. Now, keep in mind what I said about the higher level reviews. You have to be certain that this is done wrong. Like, you have to be absolutely certain, because once again, you don't want to have somebody with this much power and authority looking in your claim and finding stuff that, may have been erroneously granted in your favor. If you know that that's the case, I wouldn't go with the higher level review process. But anyway, so that's about it for the claim reasons. I just wanted to show you guys these so that way you can kind of see that there's more than one way to look at this. And especially when we get into service connected conditions, you can start to we might not pick up what you're putting down, right? Like, we might misunderstand what you're trying to disagree with. And you might actually sometimes say, well, I think it wasn't done right, and say it in a way, because I've had this happen before, to where somebody said it in a way that the VSR thought that they were disagreeing with the effective date. Like, it wasn't done right on this date. They said something like that, and it wasn't that they meant that the effective date was wrong. They meant that their examination was wrong. So I had to, I actually worked the claim where they found the error with it, and the veteran submitted it again, and I had to fix it. Kind of a pain, but not because of the veteran, but because the VSR's attention to detail wasn't as, top notch as I would like it to be. So let's see here. This is the earlier effective date. This is the kind of thing where I was talking about, where if a request for an earlier effective date on a supplemental claim for a prior claim is received and is not based upon a clear and unmistakable error. And this has to do with the 3 prongs of a clear and unmistakable error. Like, if you don't format if you just say, hey, you did this wrong, that's not sufficient. And what'll happen is we will, it specifies a factual error, not a belief system. Like, if you tell me that I didn't apply the case law correctly, that doesn't count. Like, that's not sufficient, because you have to get down into the manual, how we didn't apply the manual to it. Then we're supposed to send the claimant the earlier effective date letter, and then we're supposed to close the claim. That's the way that works. Now, there was one final tip that I wanted to talk about, and this has to do with conditions that are service connected. Okay. And conditions that are service connected in which let's say you did a 526 for an increase in January. In March, and I know that timeline isn't real, but I'm just, for the sake of sanity, just keeping it short. In March, you get your exam back, and you think that there is enough evidence to support the fact that you should have been increased to the next higher level. So you file a supplemental claim to disagree and say, hey, look, I went and got this new evidence since that claim. So it's now August. Hey, in July, I got this new evidence from my doctor that shows that I should have been at the next higher level. Okay. Now, this is kind of a hard example. It's kind of got a lot of moving parts. But what the main thing is at the time of that prior rating decision, that evidence wasn't there. So what you should do is you should submit a claim for increase, at which point in time you can potentially get your back pay, to the date in which the entitlement arose, that the increase was shown in your evidence. What happens if you file a supplemental claim for that is I have to treat the claim based upon the form you used, not the action you're telling me to do. So if you file it on a supplemental claim, well, I'm going to say that you disagree with an evaluation. So I can only use the evidence within the prior claim to re-examine that particular decision. So what happens is I will confirm and continue the prior rating decision if the evidence was not true at that time. Then what will happen is I might award you an increase based upon when you submitted that form So, what can happen is, or maybe based upon the date of claim of that particular supplemental claim, but what can happen is because you submitted on an 0995, I'm forced to use the effective date rules on the 0995 that limit me to the date of claim of the supplemental claim. Versus if you would have filed it on a 526EZ, there's 38 CFR 3.400 rules for, like, that's the effective date CFR for that. I can use that rule to go further back in time, potentially back to the original time it was, claimed. So it there are risk factors for your effective date based upon which form you use, is basically what I'm alluding to. Okay. So unless the decision at the time actually included that evidence, I might do an increase. Okay. Because I'm forced to treat it like it's a supplemental claim. And especially if you don't tell me what you're disagreeing with, right? I get to pick. If you say something to the effect of, hey, look, I had this evidence, so I should have been 70% going back to that date, what'll happen is the VSR will think that you are doing a disagreement with an effective date, and they will deny your claim. I've actually seen this happen a lot of times. So the moral of the story is, please go through when you're doing a supplemental claim and just talk to the rater. Just get out that VA Form 21-4138 statement in support of the claim and just tell them what you're trying to do. Just explain to them nicely, professionally, and just say, hey, look, this is this is what I'm trying to do. I was denied beforehand. The evidence wasn't, true at the time, but it's true now. Like, just tell us what you're doing, so that way there's less opportunities for misunderstandings, to where the naughty VSR, and there are good VSRs out there, but to where the VSR misunderstands what you're saying, and they just close your claim because they think you're talking about effective date, or they think that you are disagreeing with the evaluation and you might be disagreeing with the examination. Effective communication helps you to get the result that you want. So the more often that you effectively communicate with the VA, right, the more opportunities that you have for them to do the right thing and help you out to get the rating that you deserve, that you should get, that you deserve. So that's about all I've got for you today, with more tips for the supplemental claims. And then there are more, but I'm here for 28 minutes already, so it'll be 1,000 years worth of content. But anyway, I'd like to take the time to thank all of the members who have signed up for both the VSR and the Raider. You guys are amazing. You really warm my heart. All the comments that have been so kind, right? Like, the community is beyond. Like, I honestly didn't think that I'd have this warm of a turnout. And it does. It makes me want to do it more. So if you like this content, uh, those positive comments are helping out, and if you want to, I do adjust fire. So, if you guys do want something, let me know. I read almost every single comment. I mean, I do have limited time in the day, but, I do try. So yeah, that's about it. And if you we're at the 2500, I said that just in the last video, but it still blows my mind, the rate that we're kind of increasing here, because I think I've been going for 13 days or so, officially, kind of. But yeah, if you guys want anything, just let me know. Your support, also, actually, the super chats, super comments, those guys, amazing. Like, also amazing. I'm humbled by that. So this is me just making the video out to be 30 minutes, I think. So, but thank you all, from the bottom of my heart. My family thanks you. It's really making me want to, I'm retiring. I want to transition to doing this full time. I really think that some of the things that I can tell you guys, will help you, get a more favorable outcome, because that's what I want. I don't want you to be denied or have your rating diminished because of a procedural issue that was avoidable. And I really wish there was less secrecy about the process because it doesn't need to be secret. Maybe who we are, as the rater and the VSR, because, being a public trust level 3 employee, you are susceptible to, being coerced potentially to do a bad thing. But, you know, the process, this should be able to be done by any average person, that's a veteran. But I don't know. So I've rambled enough. But hey, anyway, thank you all so much, and Raider out.